Civil War both took place in the early Golden Age period, leaving many destitute. The opportunity to escape such a life could be an attractive proposition. Now, the Royal Navy, along with other European navies, didn't have the best reputation for employee satisfaction. Ordinary seamen toiled for modest wages and were subject to incredibly strict discipline. In contrast, privateering and piracy not only offered a chance to get rich quick, but also a rare opportunity to exert a degree of power over others. What would you choose to do? The world's most notorious pirates terrorised the seven seas and amassed huge riches, millions of pounds by today's standards. They continue to capture the imagination today. So who were they? Active at the turn of the 18th century, William Kidd, or Captain Kidd as he is often remembered, was one of the most renowned privateers and pirates of the Golden Age. Like so many pirates before and after him, Kidd had originally begun his career as a privateer, commissioned by the British during the 9 Years' War to defend its trade routes between America and the West Indies. He was later employed on a pirate hunting expedition in the Indian Ocean. But as was the case with many other pirate hunters, the temptations of plunder and booty were too great to ignore. Scallywag! Kidd's crew threatened mutiny on multiple occasions if he did not commit himself to piracy, which he succumbed to, doing so in 1698. Kidd's relatively short career as a pirate was very successful. He captured numerous ships, including a vessel called the Quader, which they found to have a cargo worth £70,000, one of the biggest hauls in the history of piracy. Unfortunately for Kidd, it was now 2 years since he had begun his original voyage, and whilst his attitudes towards piracy had evidently softened, attitudes in England had become a lot stricter. Piracy was to be stamped out and was now declared a criminal act. What ensued was one of the most notorious pirate hunts in all of history. Kidd finally arrived in the West Indies in April 1699, only to find that the American colonies were gripped by pirate fever. Up and down the coast, everyone was on the hunt for pirates, and his name was at the top of the list. The hunt for Captain Kidd was the first to be documented in newspapers around the Atlantic world. The Scottish pirate managed to negotiate a pardon from the English authorities for his actions, yet he knew his time was up. Kidd sailed for Boston, claiming that he stopped along the way to bury booty on Gardiner's Island and Block Island. The New England governor, Lord Richard Bellamont, himself an investor in Kidd's voyage, had him arrested on the 7th of July 1699 in Boston. He was sent to England aboard the frigate Advice in February 1700. 1701. The first rope put around his neck broke, so he had to be strung up a second time. His corpse was placed in a gibbet at the mouth of the Thames River and left to rot, as an example to other would-be pirates.
There weren't very many ships carrying those sorts of things. There was one case of a Spanish ship carrying gold that was wrecked on the coast of Florida. But other than that, we don't really have records of any major gold and jewels as big findings for pirates. I think buried treasure actually exists.
You probably know of him as Blackbeard. Although it is unclear exactly when Teach arrived in the Caribbean, it is likely he disembarked as a sailor on privateer ships during the War of Spanish Succession, otherwise known as Queen Anne's War, at the turn of the 18th century. Also known as Thatch, Teach was born in the English port city of Bristol around 1680. Teach may have remained a privateer during the war, however it was not long before the sailor found himself on the sloop of the pirate Benjamin Hornigold, who had also launched raids off Jamaica. The main difference now was that Teach was stealing and killing from his old employers, the British. Teach clearly made a name for himself. His ruthless nature and unrivaled courage led to his quick promotion up the ranks until he found himself equal to Hornigold's level of notoriety. While his mentor accepted an offer of amnesty from the British government, Blackbeard remained in the Caribbean. In November 1717, he stole a French slaving vessel, La Concorde, and set about converting it into a fearsome pirate ship of which he would be captain. When he was done with his renovations, the vessel had 40 cannons on board and bore the name Queen Anne's Revenge. That winter was a high point of Blackbeard's career. With several ships and over 300 crewmen to his name, he terrorised the Caribbean and the American coast, capturing numerous rich prizes and even blockading the port of Charleston and holding it to ransom in May 1718. Blackbeard became the most notorious and feared pirate of the Caribbean. According to the legends, he was a giant man with a dark, dusky beard covering half his face.
Dead man tell no tale.
He carried 2 swords at his waist and had bandoliers full of pistols and knives across his chest. Some reports even say that during a fight, he stuck sticks of gunpowder into his long hair to make him look even more terrifying. We will probably never know exactly what he looked like, but there's no doubt that he was successful. As recent research has discovered, he captured over 45 vessels, despite his relatively short career as a pirate. His reign of terror would not last much longer. On the 22nd of November 1718, with an enormous bounty on his head, Blackbeard was eventually killed in a sword fight with Royal Marines on the deck of his ship. As a powerful symbol to any who dared to follow in his footsteps, Blackbeard's severed head was brought back to the governor of Virginia. More than any other pirates combined, and Calico Jack Rackham, who became famous for his connection to Vane, and 2 of the most famous female pirates in history. More on them later. As you might have noticed, we've used Midjourney for some of our representations of pirates. That's because there aren't that many good pictures of the key people. Why have an image like this when we can have this? Came from an 18th century source.
There was a book published called The General History of the Pirates in 1724 by Captain Charles Johnson. It was 2 volumes of biographies of pirates. That was a huge sensation. It's never gone out of print. You can order a copy online. It's an interesting source because it very much blends fact with fiction. A lot is embellished, but it includes really, really vivid descriptions of piracy.
If you've seen any of the Pirates of the Caribbean films, then a consistent theme is keeping to the pirate code, first mentioned by Elizabeth Swann. According to the code of the Brethren set down by pirates Morgan and Bartholomew, you have to take me to the captain, she says. While the idea of one elaborate pirate code is fictional, real 18th century pirates did lay out their own specific set of ground rules. In the 1720s, Captain Edward Lowe and Bartholomew Roberts emerged with a set of rules and regulations which set the standards for piratical conduct on ships. Despite their reputation for anarchy, a form of democracy was actually practiced on board pirate vessels. Captains were elected by their crew. It is one of the first rules of Bartholomew Roberts. Every man has a vote in the affairs of the moment, securing at the start a pirate's right to participate in the selection of the captain. The crew also had the right to depose their leader, and again, this was done through a vote and checks on the captain's power. His second in command, the quartermaster, who was also elected, was one such check, who served as an intermediary between the pirate crew and the captain. The quartermaster was the primary executor of punishment if pirates engaged in banned practices such as gambling, prostitution, or theft, and was trusted with the fair distribution of loot. This was another surprisingly enlightened aspect of pirate life. All of Bartholomew Roberts' crew of 152 men, at least 25 were black according to trial transcripts. Edward Teach was also known to have many freedmen and escaped enslaved people as members of his crew, up to 60 at one point in his career. How well they were treated is unknown. Life as a pirate was no utopia. Many innocent sailors were pressed into piracy to replace others who had been killed in battle, to be held for ransom, or to be brought on as skilled workers such as physicians, carpenters, navigators, musicians, and others. When put on trial, as many pirates eventually were, the most common defence was simple, that they had been threatened with death unless they had signed the articles which implicated them in the first place. And if they were lucky enough to avoid capture, life at sea could also be extremely rough. Surprisingly, pirates were generally healthier and less malnourished than other sailors, thanks to their plundering of other ships. Only a proportion of the items stolen by pirates were for their monetary gain, while the other half was for their survival, including items to replenish their own supplies, tools, and food. This also meant they had access to fresh food more frequently, lowering their chances of contracting scurvy. But other diseases such as typhus and dysentery still wiped out many sailors at sea. That's not to mention the threat of sunstroke, heat exhaustion, and severe punishment, which would include heavy beatings and whippings, not walking the plank.
Walk the plank.
Fresh water was sparse, and injuries often led to infections spreading quickly on ships. Amputations were common, and in rare cases, there may have been a person with medical knowledge on board acting as the surgeon. In most cases, the surgeon was simply someone willing to perform amputations. With no anaesthetic, patients were made to get as drunk as possible to pass out. Yet obviously, this was far from effective. The pirate's life is starting to sound a bit less alluring. Pirates nonetheless kept themselves busy, cleaning, making repairs, and playing music. Music was an essential part of the entertainment and culture on board a pirate ship, with an array of fiddlers, harpists, pipers, and drummers performing sea shanties that have remained popular ever since. Ballads were also used to tell stories about pirates in an entertaining fashion. The elegy of Captain Kidd remains one of the most famous ballads to date. I can't mention downtime without talking about liquor. Taverns, located in virtually every small to large port across the globe, were a great way to let one's hair down. Alcohol, namely rum, was widely available in the Caribbean in the 17th and 18th century, and safer to drink than water. And if you consider that the daily rum ration on board Royal Navy vessels was 1 pint a day,
Where's me rum?
you can only imagine the scenes on board a pirate ship. With taverns came the brothels and other seedy establishments where pirates could relieve any built-up sexual frustration from months at sea. Remember, no children or women were allowed on board, and I quote, "If any man were found seducing any of the latter sex and carried her to sea disguised, he was to suffer death." Some pirates had families on shore should they be lucky enough to be docked at home, but often they were no more than character witnesses in a tactful ploy to evade prosecution. But they certainly existed. Born in County Cork in 1697, the female pirate Anne Bonny has become an icon of the golden age of piracy. In an era when women had little rights of their own, Bonny had to show enormous courage in order to become an equal crew member and respected pirate. The illegitimate daughter of her father and a servant, Bonny was taken as a young child to the New World after her father's infidelity was made public in Ireland. There she was brought up on a plantation up until the age of 16, when she fell in love with a private soldier named James Bonny. After marrying James, much to the disapproval of her father, Bonny established herself in the pirate hideout of New Providence. The extensive network she built with various pirates soon began to compromise her marriage, as James Bonny had become a pirate informer. Her feelings towards the notorious pirate Jack Rackham didn't help matters either, and the two ran off together in 1719. Aboard Rackham's vessel Revenge, Bonny developed an intimate and personal relationship with Mary Read, another female pirate who disguised herself as a man. Legend has it that Bonny fell in love with Read, only to be bitterly disappointed when she revealed her true gender. Rackham was also thought to have become extremely jealous of the two's intimacy. After becoming pregnant with Rackham's child and delivering it in Cuba, Bonny was reacquainted with Read. In October 1720, Revenge was attacked by a Royal Navy ship whilst most of Rackham's crew were drunk. Bonny and Read were the only crew to resist. The stand trial. In court, the true genders of the female prisoners were revealed. Anne and Mary did manage to avoid execution by pleading their bellies, claiming to be pregnant. Read was to die of fever in prison, whilst the fate of Bonny remains unknown. We only know that she was never executed. The golden age of piracy was waning fast. Mass executions were being carried out, and many infamous pirate leaders were dead. In 1739, with the outbreak of the War of Jenkins' Ear, which took place mostly at sea, Britain called upon former pirates and provided them with an amnesty. Should they join the Royal Navy or work as a privateer, all crimes would be forgiven and there'd be no risk of hanging. Former pirates now had a safety net to fall on. It would almost be as if their life as a pirate had never existed. Piracy still exists today. The International Maritime Bureau's annual report recorded 115 incidents of piracy and armed robbery against ships in 2022, with the majority occurring in Southeast Asia and West Africa. Yet these acts of piracy do not receive or warrant the same level of interest as those which occurred during the Golden Age. And to be so cool, I think it's simply because they are!